Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio, everybody. What is going on? It is Gale here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi Season 5 video. And today, we are here with episode 15's review, the final episode review. And of course, I'm very excited to get into this one. Of course, I am looking forward to talking about the episode. Of course, yesterday was a complete blast. I had a lot of fun with you guys watching the episode together for the first time live. Well, second time live, I should say. Of course, we were live for episode 14 as well. But it was amazing. But now, of course, it's time to talk about the episode. Obviously during the reaction it was super hype and everything, but now a day has passed. It's a good time to talk about the episode. And of course, this episode will not contain any light novel details per se. That'll be in a separate video. Again, cut contents that'll be coming out hopefully over the weekend, either tomorrow or on either on Saturday or Sunday. We'll have to figure out when, but cut contents will be happening this weekend. But in this video, as always, as we've done for episode reviews, I wanted it to be from a perspective of an anime only. I'm going to be focusing on things like animation, story pacing, and general approach in terms of music, voice acting, and all that sort of jazz. So of course, if you guys going to enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of good stuff, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about the episode, and what do you guys think about the entire season as a whole. I will be doing an entire season review sometime next week. I want to kind of binge watch the entire season. I might try and do that on like Monday or something when it's my day off. But I want to try and binge watch the entire season if possible, and then do my final season review. But let me know in the meantime, what did you guys think about the episode as well as the season? I'm curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Now, first and foremost, I gave it an initial rating of about an 8 or 9 out of 10, the final episode. For me personally, now having had the time to cool down a little bit, taken the episode a little bit and everything, I would probably give it a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. I think generally speaking, this episode was much better than episode 14 for one. But number two as well, I felt it was as hype as it could have been under JC staff, under the circumstances that we are presented with. 15 episode season, budget all over the place, potentially, production issues and all that sort of jazz. Getting to this point in itself is great. Obviously, as a big Danmachi fan, and I feel this too with everybody who's watching Danmachi. Everybody wants Danmachi to be amazing, wants Danmachi to be next level, but we have to also be real about what's the situation with the production studio that we have, and generally speaking, what the production committee, the likes of Warner Brothers, SB Creative, Amori, the directors, whoever it is, the producers, whoever is getting involved with the decision making with the anime, knowing what they are capable of doing, I think we have to also keep our expectations at a certain level to where we're not, going into it and obviously ending up disappointed. I know a lot of people have come into this episode, and I see two sets of people: the light novel readers who are giving it 1 and 2s out of 10s, the anime fans who are more appreciative of the season overall and are giving it around 6 to 8 out of 10. And then you have the light novel fans like me who are obviously gonna obviously as an anime only, rate it like a 6 to 8 out of 10 as well, and then maybe lower the rating to about a 5 or a 6 out of 10 for the entire season. It's a shame that we're rating it that low, but again, I want to talk about the season as a whole in a separate video. Let's talk about this episode, and this episode kind of encompasses all the issues I've had with the season, and that's why I wanted to talk about the season as a whole. The animation was good but inconsistent. I enjoyed a lot of the moments in this season when it came to animation, but I can't deny that it has been inconsistent very often, and it's the same thing here. There are some moments where I feel like the animation is a bit weak, when, especially towards the end, when Belle is running along with Alan. I think they could have done a bit better in portraying the speed, which they did really well when Belle and Otarl were going up against one another, when Belle got the lightning armor basically from Hayden. But on the flip side, obviously I am complaining about the speed shown in the end of the episode. Some of the stuff that JC staff did, I gotta give them kudos where it's necessary. They tried a lot of interesting things that I personally wasn't expecting them to even try. This and another scene later on with Belle, I think it was as well. This like sort of first person perspective or over the shoulder style animation was something I've actually never seen in an action show, and I'm very surprised that people haven't done it. Maybe it's the difficulty of it, maybe it's just maybe people don't feel like they'd be able to execute it well. I do think there were some issues and nitpicks I would have with JC Staff's iteration of this nonetheless, of course, right? You know, in terms of general quality approach and everything. But man, they did a good job with it in nonetheless, in actually just doing it. Again, credit where it's due. The idea, fantastic. Execution could have been better, but I'm not really gonna scoff it off, you know, in the sense of it was just downright bad. It was still decent, and I love the idea. Again, credit where credit is due. And this is where I will say it's a bit weird with JC stuff, because everybody says like they don't care about Danmachi or whatever it is, but I feel like they do care about Danmachi. They wouldn't do stuff like this if it wasn't with Danmachi. Like I said, I've never seen this in any of JC Staff's other works, and generally speaking, I mean, I've watched a lot of anime in my time. I don't think I've ever seen that sort of perspective in an actual combat fight. In that over the shoulder, you know, rushing in sort of style, you know, animation. It's unexpected but very welcome, and I'm hoping that maybe other studios that are better, you know, I would love for that first person perspective over the shoulder style to come into play in, like, say, Demon Slayer or something in the movie that's coming out, Infinity Castle, of course, right? I'd love for something like that to happen, because it would be so sick to see, of course, you know, seeing like Tanjiro or somebody like that doing it as well. I'm very appreciative of that, and that's what I will say about this episode as well, is like, you had moments like that. You had the moments where the speed was a bit wonky, and then you had moments where it was just solid, you know, is the best way to put it. Again, I will say their JC Staff's close-ups and everything are really well done. That is something I have to also give credit to, is when they do their close-ups are really good, but when you're far away from the character and when they're moving, especially at times, especially with Taro and Mia, I feel, is when you start to see the animation struggling a little bit. This is a complaint I've had in previous episodes as well. It was a big complaint in episode 14, of course, as well. They did it a lot better in this episode, but it was nonetheless noticeable in this episode, but to a lesser degree, to a much lesser degree, in my opinion. I think overall, to be honest, coming out of this episode, and well, going into this episode for one, I was not expecting the world, to be quite honest. I was a bit worried that, you know, if episode 14 was any example, they blew their load in episode 12. And while I do still believe they did blow a majority of their load on episode 12, they definitely left a lot, not a lot, but a decent amount in the gas tank to do episode 15. And it did show that they also gave up a little bit on episode 14 to obviously do better in episode 15, which I think was the right decision, of course. I do think it was the right decision. However, I will still nitpick some more. I do think that Belle's Super Saiyan mode, or his lightning armor, could have been a bit better, because it basically was Super Saiyan 2. They basically gave this dude Super Saiyan 2 in this episode, and I was hoping that it would be a little bit better. I don't know how they could have done. I mean, there's plenty of ways they could have done it better. It's just the aura itself. I think if it wasn't just highlighted yellow, I think the blue statics would have been fine. But if it was like maybe a more purplish aura, or maybe even a yellow aura, I wouldn't have minded just a Super Saiyan style. If it wasn't just, oh, they've just changed Belle's color shading to yellow. If it was an aura, I think that would have been also a little bit better, in my personal opinion. There's one thing I feel like Danmachi does, at least JC Staff does a lot, is when they're signifying buffs and debuffs and all that sort of jazz, it's always change the character's highlight color, or, you know, just change it to something else. Go to, like, make them fully red if they're debuffed, make them yellow if they're getting buffs, or something along those lines. And I feel like fine, in some cases it's fine, but other cases to signify a different buff and stuff like that, I think it would be a lot better if they did something like that. That's just my opinion. In terms of the fight itself, it was pretty solid overall. Again, just to do the entire fight in one go and sum it up. The entire fight was pretty good, but my bigger issue wasn't with the fight length itself. It was about cut contents more so. And like I said, I'll complain about that and nitpick that a little bit more in detail in cut contents, the video, that is to say. But it'll come into my next point, which is of course the story's pacing. While I do think that the overall story was done well in terms of episode 15, you do notice a big issue when it comes to missing content affecting the story experience. As a light novel reader, obviously I notice the differences, obviously, but I don't mind it if the anime viewers, the anime only viewers, don't necessarily notice it and feel like they've done a good job. This episode is where I saw people complaining that it felt rushed, and I completely get that, because I felt like this was the perfect opportunity for them to nail the story of Freya. Because frankly speaking, while I think they did a good job with Freya in her evil side, they never really did a good job in portraying her good side. And this was a complaint I've had for about 3 to 4 episodes now, is that all well and good showing us war games. I appreciate that they're doing war games and everything, but one of the biggest issues and my biggest concern is that they're not showing Freya's backstory. Freya's backstory would have been so important to just generally giving people an idea and also an understanding of the two facets of Freya. While people understood that, you know, Freya's seer side was her good side, the less crazier side, the less controlled side, in the sense of, you know, she's not bound by the shackles of being a goddess and, you know, being bound by all these expectations, stereotypes, and so on and so forth. People don't know the extent to which it had gone to, and not to mention same with her own familiar members. Again, this is where I feel like, just generally speaking, that's where people will feel it's a little bit rushed in terms of, okay, we got Freya's redemption arc, you could say, at the end, where she's, you know, become a good person, she's gone to becoming seer permanently as well, and everything, but it's like, you know, we need a little bit more detail in that sense, and I completely get that, and I wish they did it, because it does hurt the story a little bit, and it makes it feel like we got to point A to point B really quickly in that sense. Also, along with that, generally with this thing, some parts of the fight were snipped out basically, and unfortunately parts of the fight that made it feel a little bit more grander, a little bit more lengthier, specifically talking about the Otaral versus the quad fight, basically the fight against Ryu, Hayden, Mia, and Belle. That would have been that should have been a little bit longer, and it would have been great. So that is where I will say the story pacing was a little bit weak in this episode, but I would say it's not necessarily because of the episode of itself necessarily, but it's just because of a culmination of many factors coming in from previous episodes that weren't done and should have been done in previous episodes, are now affecting this episode, is my personal opinion on that front. And I think that is my biggest problem as well with this episode, in all honesty, is just generally getting to point A to point B was too quick, in all honesty. Too quick is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was definitely quick. It was definitely assuredly quick. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the music side of things. Music, great. I was hoping for an OST, and I was kind of hoping a little bit that they would introduce an OST. I was a bit worried that they wouldn't, but towards the end, especially I think it was around the scene, if I'm not mistaken, I loved the piano. They did a really good job with the piano instrumental around this point. It was really well done. I was kind of hoping that they would introduce it, and they did a fantastic job there. And then, of course, Heroic Desire being played. Again, it's old, reliable. It works. When you do Heroic Desire in Danmachi, it's the old, reliable, basically. You know it'll do well. It'll do well for the moment. So, great job there. I have my complaints about the OST as a whole, but I'm glad that they nailed it for this episode. They did a good job there. JC Staff did a brilliant job there. I can't complain about the OST in this episode whatsoever. I think they did a great job. And then, of course, the voice acting performance, as always, top tier, top notch. Big shout outs to Hayden's voice actor once again, Nobunaga. absolutely killed it. I'm very excited to see him coming back into Danmachi in the future, of course, be it with season 6 or, you know, some side stories, spin-offs, whatever it may be. I would love to see Nobunaga come back, because I think that'll be a fantastic thing to see, to be quite honest. So the voice acting performance, brilliant as well. Overall, in my opinion, with this episode, right, in terms of the story, in terms of everything that happened, I think it was a very solid episode overall. It had its flaws, it had its issues. I think animation and the story being rushed were obviously some of the key issues, but I don't feel it was to a great enough extent where it at least detrimented my first time viewing. I think also because I have to remind you guys that I'm going into this as a fan, and as somebody who's when I say as a fan, I'm talking about as in like somebody who's, you know, gonna turn a blind eye to the majority of nitpicks and the majority of like issues people may have. I enjoy doing that because for me personally, I'd rather go into an episode as positive as I can be. Of course, I'm not gonna be like going in with high expectations or anything, but I'm hoping always that the episode is at least gonna be good. Obviously, episode 14 burnt me a little bit on that, but this episode did not disappoint me. I mean, if you go back and watch my reaction, I was super hyped. I was very excited for certain moments. You know, Welf coming in and saving Alan. I think that was done really well. I was a bit worried they'd skip that, to be honest, low-key. I really was worried they'd skip that a little bit. But they did that super well. Generally speaking as well, the bell punch as well. Initially, I was worried on how they'd portray it, but they did a good job with the punch as well. It's not as similar to as what we saw in the light novel in terms of there was a bigger explosion and it felt like a lot more explosive in that sense, but it was pretty much spot on otherwise in that sense. Again, I think that's another thing of JC staff cutting back a little bit in order to accommodate all the issues and delays and everything of that sort. You know, they must have run out of the tank as I said by this point, because yeah, the speed scene as well was a little bit in all honesty, but still. But again, then we move on ahead, honestly, with some of the stuff that we had here. The comedic moments here were fantastic, really well done. It's not what I was expecting to see, to be honest. I really wasn't expecting to see some of the stuff here. Where is it? I want to see if it's somewhere here. Let's see, where is it? 1 second. Yeah, this one. This was amazing. This was absolutely amazing. I loved this part where they showed up all of them crying with small minor things you might not notice, like Alan swearing under his breath, basically not crying but swearing under his breath and everything. So good. Those things were super nice with the comedic moments, the voice acting performance in the lower downtime moments. Brilliant. Overall, like I said, I enjoyed this episode as a final episode, and you know, as an overall, just, you know, trying to tie the bow to the story and the season. It was good. It was a good episode. I wouldn't say it's a great episode. I wouldn't say it's an absolutely unbelievable episode, but it was a good episode and it was an enjoyable one. If it was a great episode or an amazing episode, I'd be giving it a 9 or 10 or something like that. But I think it was a good, solid episode that I found and I thoroughly enjoyed. So for me, like I said, it's a 7, maybe 7.5, maybe pushing an 8, but it would be around that ballpark. But let me know in the comment section down below, what would you guys rate the episode in the comment section down below. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of good stuff. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.